did in 2020?
I think that there are two enemies of long-term success in quant investing. And it doesn't matter how good your brand is, because it's not about your brand. The first is taking too much money in. And if you take too much money into a strategy, basically what happens is the market finds your footprint, and then your alpha turns into a risk, not a source of return. And secondly, if you don't continuously invest, it's very easy to come up with some good ideas, raise some money, sit back and count the pennies and start deciding whether you want to buy yourself a plane or a boat. The trouble is markets are continuously evolving and competition is continuously trying. And so if you're not consciously trying to innovate and you're not investing in that innovation, then what will happen is your alphas will decay. Suddenly you're left with a whole lot of money without alpha, and then you end up making some big losses.
Quant, however, can be confusing if we looked at it as a spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum, I'll put Renaissance Technologies, the firm founded by Jim Simons. And at the other end of the spectrum, I'm going to put AQR, run by Cliff Asness. Where does Man Group fit in between them?
We would love to be 100% idiosyncratic alpha. It's just incredibly hard. And you always find a certain amount of factors sort of slip into what you're doing. And we have the longest and most successful track record in momentum investing in futures markets. And, you know, why wouldn't we continue doing that? It would be silly to stop it. So, you know, I think on your spectrum, we would be 70 or 80% down towards the end that would have a medallion and a 2 sigma and less so at the what I would think of as more the AQR Bridgewater end.
It makes me wonder, why hasn't Man Group used its technological prowess to build a business in passives? You could.
We could. I think two things to it. One is, you know, it's an Uber scale business, and maybe we coulda, shoulda, woulda done that 15, 20 years ago. And, you know, look, the man had the cash on the balance sheet to buy BGI when BlackRock did and passed, and BlackRock won, right? That's a, you know, coulda, woulda, shoulda moment. I think you know, but now it's too late to start a passive business. I don't think you could compete. And secondly, our quants are, you know, they have a very, very high intellectual standards. They like to work on complicated problems. And, you know, passive is a very important asset class for clients, but it's not a very complicated problem. And if I you know, they like to be thrown really complicated things. You know, when you throw them a Rubik's Cube, they debate as to who can do it in under 5 seconds, which is a quick time. But it's sort of it's not intellectually interesting to our people.
Luke, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for taking this time to talk to me.
It's been great fun, Eric. Thanks.
Tahu.
COVID-19 has exposed a sickness in global society. It's exacerbated deep-rooted inequalities in the United States.
The wealth divide has just exploded in the wrong direction.
Structural inequalities is not healthy. It means we're leaving productivity on the table.
Around the world, migrant laborers are bearing the brunt of the crisis. And while rich nations are well into their vaccine campaigns, developing countries are falling behind.
We're not going to have as swift a recovery in the United States or in Europe if we don't make sure that everybody gets vaccinated.
2.5 million women have left the U.S. workforce due to the pandemic, while corporations face a growing demand to fulfill promises of inclusion.
Collectively, large companies have not done a great job on diversity.
You have to believe it's critical for your business.
As the world starts on a path to recovery, how do we ensure no one gets left behind?
The moment for radical change has arrived. Clearly the system is not working.
Trailblazers in business, technology, and public health convene to map out a more equal and inclusive future. It's time to move from words to action. This is the Bloomberg Equality Summit. Hello, I'm Carol Masser. The Bloomberg Equality Summit was held virtually as the U.S. marked 1 year since the start of the COVID-19 crisis. In the first months of 2021, new vaccines hold the promise of a return to normal. Even so, it's clear greater efforts will be needed to repair the social and economic damage of a pandemic that has exposed and deepened inequities across gender, class, and race. Leaders at the front lines of industry and policy came together at the summit to discuss how companies and institutions can work to close these gaps and bring about lasting change. The process starts with recognizing the stakes of the challenge.
It's become a vicious, destructive cycle where inequality has fueled the spread of the disease, and then the spread has created both health, economic, and education inequality that further fuels inequality. So I think the moment for radical change has arrived. Clearly the system is not working.
Everywhere you go, the majority of people believe that they should vaccinate their own country first, and they struggle to understand sometimes how important it is to open up economies in other countries, because, every country is dependent on imports and exports.
The economic impact of the pandemic has fallen disproportionately on women's shoulders. For the first time in history, for example, the economic downturn in the U.S., we're seeing unemployment and income losses affecting women more than men.
This is not about doing a favor for women, people of color. This is about EPS. This is about higher EBITDA. This is about business, because we know from the research and the evidence that companies that are more diverse are more profitable.
One thing that COVID has revealed to all of us is that racial equity